All right. So we have this data set, and I from the Commercial Fisheries Entry Commission, I downloaded all of the S03T permit types for 2020 permit holders, and there's some address information on here. And let me tell you a couple things about getting this set up first. And the objective here is we want to break this down to a few different types of samples and in multiple ways. And we'll randomly select these samples. And this was sort of a walkthrough for my Math 221 class. But before, let's talk about navigating around here. We have, when you download, this is downloaded into a CSV file. And let me delete these ones. So that if you have a bunch of tabs here, you want to get rid of them, you can delete them. You can also delete multiple tabs at the same time. Let's see, Shift, I think is what. We'll recreate each of these. That will delete tabs. You can add new tabs by clicking on this little button here. It says New Sheet. And like, for example, and then you can right click that, rename SRS. You can give it different colors if you want. Just for giggles, let's give this a blue color. Simple random sample with blue. Okay, so navigating around this worksheet, there are some ways to get around pretty quickly. If you were to hold down the control button and use the arrows, you'll go as far as you have data. So like, for example, in this column, column B, there's something in every single row until the end of the data set. To that row 1,863. So if you use the arrow, you'll go all the way down there. If I come over here where it says foreign address, there's a small handful of foreign addresses in here, but most of them aren't. So this field is relatively usually blank. If I press down the control button and the down arrow, it'll go down to the 243. So here's an address in New Zealand. The next one, another address in New Zealand. There's one in Greece, Germany, whatever. You can go all the way up and down. If I go to column K, where there's nothing in there, I push control up. It goes all the way to the top. I push down. If you use it up or down, it just normally goes one cell, but the control brings it all the way as far as until the next piece of data. Another thing that I did on here, if you go to view, we did a freeze pane. If I'll unfreeze it. If it's not frozen and you start looking down, you might forget what column this is. I mean, sometimes you can figure things out. Like these look like last names. That looks like first names. Those look like cities and states. So a lot of times you can figure things out, but it is handy to have those always show up. So you can freeze your panes wherever you want. Like if I wanted to freeze it, I'll just put the cursor right here on cell B2. And what that will do, when I freeze the pane, you can freeze just top row or the first column, but if you just do freeze pane, everything above and to the left is frozen. So if we scroll all the way to the right, you'll notice that as we go to the right, no matter what, that first column will always be there. This might be handy if you have 50 different columns and you have a unique identifier and you want to make sure you're with the same identifier. And then when you scroll down, you can still see the column headings. And maybe that first column is not important, and so you can just go back to freeze top row. There now that first column won't be there when you move over. Either way, I'm going to add two more columns on here. First one is called random, and we'll put that. And the next one is I'll just call it key, sure, or K. And I'm going to introduce a formula. Every time you put a formula into Excel, you do equals, then the formula. For example, I'm using the formula rand. It doesn't take any arguments, so it has an open and closed parenthesis. And that generates a random number somewhere between the value of 0 and 1. And so the next step that we're going to do here, we're going to assign a random variable, a random number to every single one of these rows. So you copy by hitting Control C, or if you right click and copy, same thing. Then you can paste. If you right click, you can paste it. Another thing you can do is Control V is paste. And it could take a long time going all the way down. There's a couple things you can do to make it faster. If you pick something like, let's see, I have this cell. You'll notice when a cell is highlighted, there's a little box at the bottom right-hand corner. You can copy formulas down, and that is sort of fast, but that can still take a while. So now we have just over 250 records. But let's get everything done. Remember the control and arrow thing? I'll cache that into memory, the formula to memory by hitting Control C. You'll see how it's highlighted, right? The little boxes moving around. That means that's what's copied. I'll go over here because remember what is in column D or over here, there's values in every single row. So I'll hit Control down, and that goes all the way to the bottom of the data set. So now I can go back over to where the K is. And this time I'm going to hold down Shift. That way the cell will remain to be selected. Shift, Control, and up. And I'll hit Control V, which is paste. And now we have a random variable assigned to each one of these. So that's pretty handy. The next thing that I'll set up for here is I'm going to give it some numbers in here. Say, for example, if you wanted to pick every 10th record, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can start populating these. Excel looks for formulas, so I'll just put 1, 2, 3, and then if you copy that down, it goes all the way down, and it'll go down to the very last record. What is that? 1862. We want to put it into smaller groups, and so what you can do when you come down to 11, you hit equals, and that's so you start to write a formula. And I'm just going to click on the cell up here. What is that? L12. So that's a reference formula, and that tells you that's 10 rows above, and there's no dollar signs in that formula, which means it's not locked. And so if I were to copy this, make Control C to copy, I paste it here, it gives it a reference. So now that's L3, and we can do this little trick about copying it all the way down, and that gives us, it's pointing to whatever is in the cell 10 above. And you could do this for 15th, 20th, or however you want to do that. That's one method of putting these into groups of, if you only want 10% of all the records. You could also write a formula. So we have one in here. I'm going to use an if-then formula equals if L2 is greater than or equal to 10, and give it a value of 1 to start over. Otherwise, L2 plus 1. And what that means is, let's just chunk through this a little bit. So if we're looking at, for example, this cell right here, what is that, L10, it's saying, okay, if L9 is greater than or equal to 10, give it a value of 1. Otherwise, whatever's in L9, take that number and add 1. That's how you get 9. Same thing, you get 10. But when you get down to L12, it's asking, okay, is that greater than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. And so it gives it a value of 1 rather than adding to the counter. And so if you were to use this method, you could do, like, for example, this handy thing about this is if you change your mind and you decide you want 20, let's just put 20. Now, when you copy this formula all the way down, you've got that's a little bit faster than trying to reset the formulas that point to 10. You move those to be 20 above. But anyways, so there's two different ways that you can do that. Let's start pulling out some samples. The simple random sample, that's what SRS stands for. We can have, let's say if you want, for example, let me turn on the, I'm going to turn on filters. If you come over here, if you're somewhere in the data set and you click on filters and you don't have if you have specific things selected, like for example, I'm going to select this array of cells. Now, when I click on filter, it will only put a filter right there. That's not really what you want. Maybe it is, but it's not what I want. And so I'm going to turn the filters off. Just click on it, turns it off. And if you don't have if you only have one cell selected, it will look at it'll try to guess what your table is you have. And so with this, we have information that goes all the way to the first row. Then you have these headers. So Excel will look at this and recognize everything between A1 and L1863 as being one table. It's pretty smart like that. And so we'll go to, let's add filters. So I click on filter, it'll, on all the headings, it'll create a heading that you can change things around a little bit. Like for example, if I want everything from Anchorage, that's a city in Alaska, I'll go up to where it says city, and I'll click on this little thing right here, and I'm going to select all, and I'll find Anchorage. And there it is. So now we have all of the Anchorage records. There's 103. You could actually start typing things out. So like I'll come in here and select that. I can start typing in Fairbanks. And then there it is. So we've got all 10 Fairbanks records. Okay, but let's grab a random sample. So you'll remember that with a random number generator, it picks a value between 0 and 1, and it's all with random. So when you have a somewhat large data set like this one, where you have nearly 2,000 records, if you were to filter it out to a value of 0.5 or less, or 0.5 or greater, you'll end up with about half the records. So let's do that. Greater than 0.5. So you're basically saying, give me 50% of the records. I'm going to click OK. Now we have 917 records. Well, let's try this. Greater than or equal to. Or however you want to set it. It'll be pretty close either way. Well, so there's 914 records. Well, it's about the same number of records. And then to select the entire data set, I'm going up to cell A1, and I'll hold down Shift Control Right, and that brings me all the way to the very end until there's no more data, which is in column L. And I still have the Shift and Control held down. You can let go, but I'll push it down again. And then when I'm pushing down Shift and Control, I'll push the down arrow, and that will select everything. And now I can copy it. Control C is copy. Let me try that again. Control C is copy, and you see all these lines. That's because there are some gaps in here, but it's only selecting what you have shown. And so I'll go to SRS, and I'll come up here, and I'll paste Control V. And so now we only have these records that are, let's see, 914 records. That's about half the records from the data set. And these, okay. And the next step, well, you can delete these things. These don't, well, anyway, not that it matters. So we have our permits. So let's go to that. That's a simple random sample. What happens though if you want to stratify your sample? So if you want to include separate subgroups in there, but you still want to randomly select them, what do? Like, for example, if you were taking a survey of college students or high school students, and so you have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, and you grab 10% of all those students, the whole student body, there is a probability that you will only select seniors, and that may not give you a very representative population of what you're trying to look for if you're only asking seniors. So if you want to ensure that you pick records from each of the subgroups as well, you can do a stratified sample. So let's do that. We create a new worksheet, stratified, and let's go to, just for this example, let's look at everybody who lives in Alaska as one example. And so we have, oh, this is still selected. Let's see how many records we have of permit holders with an Alaskan mailing address. And we have, it looks like 845. And so that's all the Alaskan one, but let's just pick a random sample of them. Number of filters, it's greater than or equal to 0.5. So instead of 845, now we have 417, which is about half. And I'm going to go to the bottom right-hand corner, Shift Control Left, do it a couple times, and then all the way up. And now we have this entire data set. Control C, I'm going to copy that. I'll go over to where it says stratified and paste it. So now we have all these Alaskan addressed records. I'm going to go to View, Freeze Pane, top row. There, it looks nice that way. Then when I come down here to record number 418, we still have, you can still see what the headings are. Okay, we'll go back to permits. Okay, those are all the Alaskan addressed. Let's pick Washington. I bet you we'll find a bunch of these. Let's see how many. Turn this off. Okay, so we have 631 records that are here. So let's pick about half of them. I'll go to the number, I think it's less than, greater than or equal to 0.5. And of those 600 or so records, we now have 304. Great. So I'll go to one corner, shift control left, then all the way to the top. And then when I'm at, it goes to the top, but I'm still going to hold down the shift and I'll push down just one. And that will give me everything but the heading. Oh, which doesn't matter. We try that again. You go to the row just below where the heading is. Okay, so I'll copy that. Put it back to the stratified. There. Now we've got a random sample of the Washington permit holders. And let's do everybody else. So I'll select all. I'll unselect Alaska. I'll come down here and unselect Washington. And now we have, I'm just curious how many records there are here we have left. So we have 371 records. And let's grab about half of them. Number filter, greater than or equal to 0.5. And that gives us 178. Okay, so I'm going to come up to where it says A1, come down just one, and I'll pick all of these. Control C, I'll copy them, just stratified. So now we have a random sample that we have about as many records as we have in the simple random sample, but because it's stratified, we have representation of 3 of the larger different subgroups that are in here. And so it might be a little more representative if you're doing a study based off of these individuals. So that's the simple random sample, the stratified sample. And then next, we'll have a systematic sample. So let's create systematic. Let's go back to permits. And we'll use this K column that we created. We're going to turn off these filters. Well, there's a couple of ways you can turn off filters. You can go back, you can click on these individually and click on select all, and that can take a while. You'll notice that one way you can tell how this is filtered is if you look at these right here where these row numbers, they're blue, that means it's filtered. Another quick way to turn filters off, if you go back to home, where it says filter, you turn the filter off, you turn the filter back on, and you have the option of using the by doing it this way, you'll have the option of filtering again. Okay. Oh, also, if you were to select only one column, like I'll do this right here, this will only filter that column instead of everything else that's here. Okay, so let's grab anything with a value of 1. And so now we have, let's see how many records do we have. Now we have 94 records. And so we only have 5% of all the records from before. Because remember, we put the filter to 1 to 20. And it only selects however this is sorted. I didn't this came sorted in some other way, but however that was, that it only selects every 20th record. We'll copy that, put it into where it says systematic. I'll paste it, Control V, and there we have 5% of all the records if you want to do a study off of them. And another way you can do there's a cluster sample that we talk about in class. We won't really use that for this data. If you wanted to do that, you would, if you could map out with GIS all of the records, and then you grab clusters and you look at every single record within that particular cluster, and you make some assumptions that things that are nearby or within a certain proximity have similar values, and that's how you could do that. But for this data set, that's not going to work out very well. So let's just do the convenience sample. And I'm calling this conv for short because it's a lot more convenient than spelling everything out with convenience. And if you're doing a study with these, that might be like, for example, you send out a survey and you see whoever responds, well, that's convenient, so let's use them. Or you could also say, I'm gonna hit, hold on, shift, page down. I'll just page down until we got, oh, that's kind of far. Let's not go that far. I could say, let's grab the first 100 records because that's really easy. Okay. So we'll go down to 100. We have a heading, so I'll go down to 101. And so I'm going to grab, oh, got all sorts of stuff going on here. Shift Control up. I'm going to copy that, and I'll paste it into the convenience one. And so there we go. We've got 100 records. Well, that's another way that you can grab a sample of a data set. Great. So those are our different samples that we talked about in class, and ways that you can manipulate a data set to make those into specific samples.